Danes managing across cultures. But what am I doing here in Denmark talking about Danes managing across cultures? Well, I am partly Dane. That's why I'm tall and blonde. You were wondering about that. But I'm really here because I have been doing training for Danish companies since 1993. I average about 6 visits a year to Scandinavia, including especially Denmark. Every visit is averaging about 3 weeks, and that gives me time to learn a bit about the challenges that Danish companies, Danish managers, Danish project leaders have when they face the rest of the world. Because Danish business and management culture have evolved differently from most of the world. That makes life very interesting, and also for me. So we're going to compare the business and management cultures of Danes with those of the 4 BRIC countries. And it's good to start with a definition. A business culture is a unique set of expectations about how to do business. A management culture is a set of expectations about how to manage and how to be managed. And we're going to come to that in a few minutes and see why that causes challenges. But first, we're going to compare Denmark and 4 BRIC cultures. When we compare cultures, we are in danger of stereotyping. But we're not going to stereotype today. We're going to talk about some cultural tendencies. So we're not going to say all Brazilians are like that, all Chinese are like this. We are going to talk about cultural tendencies. The input from this introduction comes from participants at our many global management seminars since 1993, as well as scores of interviews in recent years. And we can categorize the most important differences in business cultures into 3 basic categories. These are the variables that cause the trouble for Danish business people today with the BRIC countries. Let's have a look at them one by one and see why they cause problems and how to get around these cultural barriers. Let's start with the fact that my anthropologist friends tell me there are now about 6,900 cultures in the world, and about 15 of them are deal-focused, task-focused, which includes the Danes. The business people in the BRIC countries tend to be relationship-focused, and we're going to see why that's important. Number one, relationship-focused cultures tend to be low-trust cultures. Low trust means that they don't like to interact with other people who are strangers. They prefer to interact with people they already know. And the way to solve that problem when we start a business relationship is to get introduced by somebody. But suppose we don't do that. Suppose we forget to get introduced. A Danish company I worked with 2 years ago in Jutland, when I started talking about relationships, he raised his hand and he said, "Now I understand why my approach to China did not work." He did some very professional research. He identified a Chinese company in Guangzhou that was the perfect match for his company. And he sent that Chinese company a long email with all the necessary information. But to his surprise, he got no answer. But he was convinced he had the right partner, so he sent the email again and again and again. Persistent. He sent that email 9 different times. And sometime after that, he actually got a reply, and today they are doing business. But what took so long? Culture is about expectations. Relationship-focused Chinese expect that you will be introduced if they haven't heard of you and your company. He should have been introduced by the very busy and very useful Danish Consulate General in Shanghai. And then he would have got a reply very quickly. Another difference in expectations has to do with the importance of face-to-face meetings. One of my oldest clients in Denmark, going back to the mid-90s, is a very unusual company anywhere in the world because it owns a 70% market share of its product niche. Not very many companies today have 70%. I was involved many times with that company training their sales engineers and their service engineers, traveling all over the world. They did a super job. They sold lots of goodies, and then they started having trouble. They didn't get paid. So the next session I did for this Danish company was to work with their accounts department. And I found out that in one place, India, their invoices from licensees and customers were up to 2 years out of date, not paid. I found out how they were trying to solve the problem by sending emails and making phone calls. But that's not what the Indians expect. Indians expect if you have a serious issue like you really want to get paid, let's see your face. So the senior person from the accounts department flew to Mumbai, spent 2 weeks eating tandoori, drinking tea and a few liters of beer, and not long after she returned, 2 years' worth of invoices from various customers and licensees were paid. Why? Because she matched the expectation of her business partners. Expectations differ. The expectations of Scandinavian companies differ widely from most of the world, as we're going to find out. Here we have about 15 cultures that use direct language like Danes do, like Germans do. But the people in the BRIC countries, in many situations, prefer to use vague, indirect language. That's to avoid offending people, to avoid causing loss of face. And they also avoid saying no to bosses. Let me give you a quick example from a seminar I did some years ago at a university in France, but it was for international MBA students. There was one Danish student there, a recent graduate from Roskilde, and one Brazilian guy in his 30s, an engineer. I posed this question. You're new on a job, it's a good job, you've been there 1 week. On Friday, your boss says, would you come to my home this weekend, tomorrow morning, and paint my garage? Well, the Danish graduate from Roskilde University raised her hand and she said, well, first, I'd tell him to go to hell. And on Monday, I'd get him fired. So that was the egalitarian Danish response. The Brazilian guy who'd been around the world a few times said, well, in Brazil, I would say, boss, when I finish painting your garage, can I paint your house too? So the way we interact with bosses varies sharply around the world, and it's something we need to know about when we are project leaders, expat managers, or in any way managing people from other cultures who have different expectations. Face issues are not very important in deal-focused cultures. These are issues that we always cover. In China especially, although face is a universal concern, it's just especially important in China. I mentioned that people in relationship-focused cultures have a problem saying no when they mean no, so they tend to say yes. My Chinese-speaking son has found 18 different ways of saying no in Chinese, none of which include the word no, but some of which include the word yes, which can be slightly confusing unless we anticipate the problem. So when does yes really mean yes with Chinese business partners? Orally, if it is repeated and emphasized on the phone or in person. Written, when it is repeated and accompanied with details. But it really means yes if the person who said yes is someone with whom we have a personal relationship, not just by phone and email. Then it usually does mean yes. The last of the three variables is one in which the Scandinavians and the Danes are in an even tinier minority, because the people in the BRIC cultures and other cultures around the world are mostly hierarchical, where employees show great respect and deference to their bosses, and in Denmark, of course, that's not the case. So we have an issue when we are trying to manage people in all four BRIC countries. In all four BRIC cultures, culture tells employees to expect their boss to tell them what to do and how to do it. Now, here comes the problem. When a Scandinavian manager who succeeded using the Scandinavian model of management and rises in his or her company, and now they are tasked with being a project leader in, for example, one of the BRIC cultures, or perhaps being an expatriate manager in New Delhi or Shanghai or Sao Paulo or Moscow, they now find that their local employees have a quite different expectation about how to be managed. And now the manager is the one who is going to have to solve the problem. If I have a staff of 700 Russians outside of Moscow, I'm not going to expect 700 Russians to figure me out. That's not how it works. So these are the challenges that I wanted to briefly mention today. We have deal-focused Danes, relationship-focused BRIC people. We have direct-speaking Danes and less direct-speaking people in the four BRIC cultures. And in some ways, the most important difference is this one between Danes, who belong in the Scandinavian group of the world's most egalitarian cultures, facing people with hierarchical expectations. And that is enough to keep us busy thinking about how Danes can successfully manage across cultures in the four BRIC countries. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you for an interesting talk. I was wondering, the stereotypes versus tendencies, can you set a percentage of how many people in the BRICS behave the way you described?
I wish I could. I can't. Because you have regional differences, generational differences, and in the BRIC countries, especially differences in how much exposure they've had to the outside world. And then you have the inevitable individual differences. The good news is that you may have some of your local partners who are aware of these differences and better able to meet you halfway. But it doesn't always work that way, and you can't count on it. That's the best I can answer. I can't use percentages.